kind enough to give me a wonderful script to work with, so I'm going to jump in.
I wrote it myself.
If I go off script, she'll nudge me a little bit and I might fall off my chair. So welcome to Bellingham Film's April Mixer and VR discussion, sponsored by Cascadia International Women's Film Festival, so congratulations to them. Cascadia International Women's Festival is a multi-day annual curated film festival celebrating exceptional films directed by women from around the world. Next week on April 20th through the 23rd, Cascadia will present a 4-day film festival in Bellingham, Washington to include films, social events, workshops, industry panels, educational events, and more. We'll hear more info about the event at the end of our discussion, and we hope that you'll all plan on attending that event as well. Introduce myself. That's an easy one for me. Again, my name is Amy Lillard. I am the State Film Commissioner, and I run an organization called Washington Filmworks. Washington Filmworks is a legislatively commissioned private nonprofit organization, so it's a weird, not a weird, I shouldn't say weird. It's a lovely public-private partnership, and so we run 2 divisions. One is the Production Incentive Program, which is a $3.5 million fund that we have each year to facilitate production. And then also we run the official state film office. Chris Carnes, who runs that division for Washington Filmworks, is here. We have over 20 years of production resources under our umbrella. Chris can tell you when the apple blossoms blossom. She can tell you where you can drive up to a waterfall. She can also tell you where Izzy the camel lives. So she's fun at cocktail events. But also just is a wealth of information. So if you have questions about locations or permitting or anything like that, you of course can turn to your local folks here. But in addition, if you're looking outside of the Bellingham-Whatcom County area, feel free to contact Chris too. Introduce the panelists. This is very helpful. I love it.
Everything you need.
Everything I like. It's lovely. So today we have Sandy Cioffi, a Seattle-based film and video artist at Fearless 360, a startup collective working at the intersection of arts, culture, education, storytelling, and technology to develop content, programming, and curriculum for immersive VR, AR, 360 media. Sandy is a director and producer of the documentary film Sweet Crude, should say award-winning documentary film Sweet Crude, I'm going to make that adjustment, and has produced and or directed the films Crocodile Tears, Terminal 187, and Just Us. My personal favorite anecdote about Sandy is that she has coined this region the Silicon Rainforest, which we're going to talk about. Who needs Silicon Valley when we got the Silicon Rainforest, right? So we'll talk about that a little later, but welcome Sandy Cioffi. And of course, we have Avielle Heath, the Executive Director of Bellingham Film and a freelance filmmaker. She works with several Bellingham-based production companies like Hand Crank Films, C Young Creative, and Tool House, among others. She has just completed filming her first 360-degree VR project, and is here today to share her experience as a newbie to the world of VR filmmaking. And of course, now I have to add my favorite anecdote and story. So as many of you may know, we are back in Olympia this year to try and get this program renewed that I run called Washington Filmworks. However, the first year that I ever met this lady, she said, you know, I'm going to come down with a group from Bellingham. I was like, oh, that is fantastic, right? She came down like with a force. Like she walked in the door, everyone had Bellingham Film t-shirts, and everyone was like revved up and ready to go. It was the best organized group I have seen, and I've been down there the last 3 years. So welcome, Avielle.
Gotta represent.
Before we jump into the discussion tonight, I wanted to invite Mary Keene from the Foundry Makerspace to come up and talk a little bit. She has some information about gear here in the area. Yay! Woo!
So hi, my name is Mary Keene, and I am the director of the Foundry. The Foundry is your local makerspace where you can come down and use our tools so you don't need to put the cost out to buy your own. So we provide low-cost access to tools such as 3D printers, laser cutter. We do have some wood shop tools as well. Got a hot wire foam cutter for you scenery people. And we also have the HTC Vive available as one of our tools as well. So people can come down and utilize our tools. You can come and use the laser cutter, or if you'd like to, you can come and you can use the Vive to go ahead and either do your coding, write your apps, or work on your film. Please come down and visit me. Wow. We're at 1000 F Street, which is the corner of Roeder and F. Hopefully I'll see some of you there.
So I'm just curious before we get started, how many people here have had a headset on? Okay, so everyone almost has had a headset on. How many have made 360 content? Interesting. How many of you are filmmakers? Interesting. Okay, well that's good. That's good kind of setting the stage. So I think it would be really great then to kind of start, I'm going to ask Sandy to do this because I've heard her do it on many occasions, to really talk about what do we mean by virtual reality, augmented reality, XR technology, to kind of give you a landscape understanding of what this space is and how it works. So Sandy, can I ask you to jump in there?
Sure. Cool. I apologize in advance for the people for whom this is repetition, but I'll give it my best shot to be crisp. So essentially, when we refer to the overarching, let's call it the largest Russian doll, XR, that category subsumes all of the following: virtual reality, augmented reality, what is sometimes called mixed reality, and the other overarching term, immersive. Some people would include in that a variety of other digital storytelling tools, everything from projection mapping to use of data visualization in real time. Some people really expand, which is to say that they look at it as immersive and expanded media, media that cuts across genres and cuts across modalities. So the other, I think, important aspect of the trajectory is if you're looking at a 360-degree film that is shot what we would call stereoscopically, or if you remember the old Viewmaster, if you're old like myself and these were a toy when you were a child, or if you're young and you saw it on Nickelodeon on those old 70s shows and then went out and bought it in a deconstructed way at a vintage store, you would know that a Viewmaster is stereoscopic photography, so it gives you the feeling, your brain actually tells you that you are present somewhere. Very similar phenomenon if you use stereoscopic photography inside a headset and you can look around at the whole world. So the trajectory is you can look around you, that's 360 film. You can move around the world in a world that was built, that's virtual reality. You can change the world that you're in that environment, is also virtual reality at, let's say, a more complex level. And then you can put layers of that built world into the existing world. That's augmented reality. So to give you the sort of brands that would be associated with it, you would mostly think of augmented reality with Microsoft's HoloLens, which a lot of people can't wait to get their hands on. Other people are like, where is it already? Mm-hmm. So HoloLens would be the most commonly known aspect of a headset with augmented reality. The most common mobile use of augmented reality that all of you might have heard of would be the Pokemon Go game, which is a good example of combining augmented reality and geolocated storytelling, basically. So depending on where you are, there's something that you can make happen. So then you would associate in the world of virtual reality, the Oculus Rift would be a world in which you can move around or possibly move things and change the world. Or the HTC Vive is another headset environment in which you can do similar things. Those two, the Rift and the Vive, have to be connected to a computer, which is still a sort of higher end experience, both in terms of entry for money and technical experience. The more accessible headsets are either the Gear VR, which is Samsung and it sort of works with their phone, or multiple other players now, but probably most importantly the big one would be Google, because Google keeps releasing the template for all their things as open source. which is a whole other conversation about the platforms. And I would say the only other pertinent thing is in the world of 360 video, it's become true now that every regular, simple-to-use video player has now released a 360 player. So Vimeo has their 360 player out, YouTube does, Facebook Live. So clearly all of those platforms believe that it's here as something significant to stay. Is that what you want?
Yes.
Because if it wasn't, that was a lot of words. Was not what you wanted.
No. So I want to approach this conversation first from the standpoint of each of you have had filmmaking experiences, and now you have had this new experience in this environment, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right? So what does that, so first of all, describe that experience, and then talk a little bit about, from just the physical aspects of production, what was so dramatically different.
I think just sort of wrapping your head around the fact that you are going to be filming 360 degrees. So how do you eliminate your crew? How do you make your production design work in that space? So this, for Micah and I, because we co-directed it, it was really hard in the beginning just sort of figure out how do you go about filming it, because we're used to being able to go in and do close-ups and cutaways, and you have a lot more possibility of movement. But with VR, we've never done it before. So I approached it more like a theater production. So I've got a background in theater. So for us, the idea was to take the camera, stick it in the middle of the room, and then have all of our action happen around it. And then once we figure out how to do that, our next project will start looking into different ways that we can edit and stitch things together. Because before I walked into this, I thought all you really could do is stick it in the middle of the room and then film around it. But after learning more about the editing process, there's all kinds of interesting ways where you can take 10 or so different images and stitch them all together to create that 360 world. So there's a lot more learning that I have to do, but in the very beginning, just sort of taking that traditional filming and then matching that with my theater experience to find some sort of middle ground is how we started out.
And just for a point of reference, stitching is indeed taking all of those scenes and putting them together, and it is one of the most cumbersome, time-consuming, and expensive parts of the VR process. However, there are interesting things happening right here in Washington State. So there's a company out of Seattle called Pixvana, and Pixvana is developing, one of many companies who are developing a kind of start-to-finish production platform so that stitching will take no time at all, and it will be much less expensive. But right now, stitching is one of those things that is challenging as you walk into the space. So.
Absolutely. I think trying to understand the stitching process was something that in the very beginning of the project we didn't completely consider. We were told that we had this little donut that we could work within. So you want to be 4 feet away from the camera and then somewhere around 10 feet because there's different stitch lines. And then after working through choreography and looking at what it actually looks like on the 360 cameras, we realized that 4 and 10 feet wasn't going to work for us. Then we found out that 6 feet from the camera is where we wanted to be so we could see the full body of the dancers, and then they could only go about 12 feet away before that we'd start to lose them in all of our set design. So understanding that there's more than just putting it in the middle. Now we have a donut that we have to work with it. So one step, next step, next step.
Did it at all change the way in which you, I mean, I know in this was a music video, and you were working with dancers who are the talent, we'll call them our talent. How does it impact your directorial choices?
Well, at some point you literally just have to let the dancers do their thing. So you can, when we did all of our rehearsals, Mike and I stayed in the room, we walked through everything with the dancers, made sure they had everything that they needed in order to perform it correctly, and then you go in, press record, everybody steps out, and it's just the dancers in there. And at this point, this is where, from my understanding of technology, we can still improve things. What we had to do in order to see a live feed of what we were filming, we had our 10 camera array, and we had one of the 10 cameras that we could actually view on a cell phone. And then we took a smaller Samsung camera that has 2 cameras that can film 360 degrees, and you can also see a live feed of that, but it's very grainy. So we were able to see the basic shapes of our dancers to make sure that they were moving correctly, they had elongated moves that they needed to do, but as far as anything beyond that, it's fairly difficult.
It's quite funny because Micah said, volunteered in our conversation in the lobby. He's like, yeah, we just went around the corner and hid and behind the curtain. And I was like, oh, well, there you go. So does all of the technology and all of those details, how does that affect the creativity of the piece for you? Like, how do you find that balance? Or do you? Or is it a different experience?
I think it's a great challenge because I'm a firm believer that if you have anything that you can imagine in the world can happen, you'll spend your entire time just imagining things. So the moment you start putting parameters around your project and what you want to do, how you want it to look, you can start developing that creative. So working in the 360 world, you already have some parameters developed. And then you can work from there to start developing your creative. So it's not everything's possible, but there's still quite a bit that's possible. Which I will say, now that I'm learning more and more about the editing process, my mind's just gone insane with all the different creative things that we can start coming up with, not only with filming traditional 2D and transferring that to 360 degrees, but also creating different 3D graphics and things in other programs to then import into the 360 degree world. So the possibilities are endless, and we're all just sort of learning how it can interact.
It's a really nice transition. So Sandy is directly responsible for putting a headset on me for the first time. And for many people, I'm sure, having programmed many 360 festivals at this point. So when for you, Sandy, because you're an early adopter, when for you did you realize the power, and what is it about the virtual reality space that you think is so compelling?
It's inside of every answer you just gave, that the original urge as a filmmaker, storyteller, theater director. I used to do media for live performance through the 90s, actually. So in a way, I was already doing it without knowing that I was craving to make work in an immersive space. I was making work in an immersive space. I was doing things like at On the Boards, working on shows where we'd be using mosquito netting and rear projection to try to create holograms, basically, which is just in a long tradition, theatrically, of all kinds of, a deus ex machina is immersive media, So part of it is that what's old is new again. So the challenges you're discussing about having to just look at a grainy thing but guess, but use your instincts differently on set, that's what making film used to be like. We didn't have a live video feed, right? So I'm old enough that I've got the full trajectory. Like, the aspect ratio of my media making life started out like this in 8mm film. And over the course of my career, my aspect ratio has gone like this. And now it's like back to equirectangular, right? So there's this constant way that we're playing with where stories go in a frame or in a world. And I think the urge that became the shift for me from what I've always been interested in as an artist, teacher, community activist, it's that this medium immediately takes care of the problem I think we have with too much light without heat. I think there's a Coast Salish story about stories, that it's dangerous for people to have too many stories with light with no heat. And I think that became documentary filmmaking in my era, that there was just such a proliferation because of the good thing, the democratization of media and media centers. There was so much work being made, like, this is urgent, pay attention, everything's terrible. And I am a filmmaker in that tradition, so I don't mean to, to deride it too much. But for me, standing on the dock in Nigeria in 2005, on the moment that I promised myself I had to do this thing, I really wished it was all in 360. I wanted to bring 3 cameras back so that we would shoot this honest film where I couldn't get away with all the manipulative editing that you can't, like, help yourself from doing. And I think what you were saying, it's like sooner or later you realize I have to Where's Waldo myself because I'm in it. No matter what I do, I'm in it, right? Yeah. And I think that's a great lesson about it. Like, I'm in this movie, no matter how you slice it. So I think that's been the urge for me.
May I offer you a glass of water?
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. It's interesting. So, what, as we all think about it, right? So, as the state film commissioner, I spend an exorbitant amount of time thinking about what we're doing today and thinking about what we're going to do tomorrow, right? Our job is to figure out how we keep everyone here and working. A lot of the things that, you know, that as this space unfolds, and there is so much information out there about how incredibly powerful it's going to be from a cinematic standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. You know, some of the pushback that we're getting in the media and some of the pushback you get from folks is this a fad? You know, like, is it a fad? Is it, you know, 3D is cool, but it's not everything, right? Is it that kind of a thing? If it is, why? If it's not, why not?
I don't think it's a fad. I think, well, if you look at how Facebook, Vimeo, YouTube, they're all picking up on it. If you look at news networks, a lot of them are doing 360-degree news broadcasts. So it's a thing that a lot of people are picking up, not just creative people. It has a lot of different uses, so I think it's just going to continue to get better from here. I know that as far as sci-fi goes, it's something that we've imagined for decades and decades and decades, so why would we just let it be a fad if we've been talking about it for so long? I don't know.
I agree, and I would add, I think there are a couple of critical distinctions between things like the gimmick of 3D, which for some applications is an absolutely stunning thing. Like if you see Pina in 3D, you think, why didn't more movies like this get made? Did people get to see that movie in 3D? It was amazing. Wim Wenders, it was an extraordinary film. See, very rarefied. But there's an important distinction between virtual reality, augmented reality, XR, the larger what is this that we were talking about earlier, and something like a gimmick. And to me, it's all in the notion of cinematic language and actual structural communication. So if you consider in the early days of film when no one had intercut downstairs and upstairs yet, the idea that a time-based medium could do something different to our actual storytelling mechanism hadn't occurred to us yet. And then someone intercut the downstairs of a fire and the upstairs of a fire, and cinematic language challenged the way we were just filming radio shows. All of a sudden, it began to grow into its entire own art form. And I feel that much like photography really liberated painting to become an entirely different art form in the last 100 years, I actually think XR will liberate film to find a new moment for film. I don't think this is a replacement. I believe this is a massive yes and. And I also think it's about the moment of room scale connection over over wires. So if right now this room were fully already an immersive space, we could be sharing this space with 12 indie theaters around the world in room scale. All of us. It's not about the headset. When you watch, just a fun geeky thing to watch is Mark Zuckerberg's speech from Connect last November, where he's during the day showing on the Oculus Rift going back and visiting his wife and dog. And it's the promise that Skype was never able to deliver on because it was still in front of you on a flat screen. This is demonstrably a feeling in your body that you're connecting differently with somebody over those wires. And I certainly am not suggesting that replaces human connection, but it adds a whole other level of potential connection to the places that we can't just go. So to me, that alone is a very different thing than a gimmick in how we watch a film. Mm-hmm. It's another, it's an actual another piece of language. There'll be a new literacy for room scale communication in real time, I believe.
So, just from a foundational standpoint, this past fall and winter, consumer-grade headsets were readily available on Amazon and Walmart and all these places, right? So the last figure I read, which may be a little low because it's before the holidays, was that 6 million households have headsets now in you know, available for whatever they're doing. Is that a revolution? Is that enough adoption? When does it become? When does it evolve from being what it is today to everyone have like their smartphones now? What causes that?
Content, work that we love.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing that has changed every modality of making work and making art and sharing human stories forever and all time. The need to do it because you loved something so much. It's every genre of film that exploded a new lens style or a new way of dealing with color, because Rocky created the Steadicam because you had to get in the fight, right? Like it's content, and that tipping point's not there because we're at the desert of investment in content, and there are a variety of reasons for it that we can't bemoan. We just have to use tech's exuberance for selling tech to get them to invest in content differently than they have before.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have to do.
I think one of the interesting things too is I think that many of the technologists have taken it as far as they can, right? That is their job, and now you've got to hand it over to the creative community because they're going to take it 3 steps further. And I think that, you know, my personal opinion is that we're at that juncture at this point. On the eve of Cascadia, Women's International Film Festival, it's an interesting space, the 360 space for women. You know, why do you think that is? Like, why is it an interesting?
You make the best panel faces. Like, I just saw the best panel faces I've ever seen.
Sorry, my teachers always knew what I was thinking in class. It's horrible. I don't know. I really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just like the opportunity to create in a different space. I've spent 5 years creating in the 2D space, and I have a fairly good understanding of how to do that, so why not challenge myself and try something new? And I think a lot of women around the world are not afraid to challenge themselves. They want to try something new. They want to see what it's like to do the thing that nobody else is doing yet. So if you have the opportunity to, why not? I honestly never really thought of doing a VR project. Micah brought it to me, and I was just like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I have no clue how to do this, but we're going to do it. And within a couple months, Micah and I figured it out, and now we are in the editing process. So, do it.
I'm going to add some cliche feminism to it.
Right on.
I'm going to go a little bit women's studies on a little Susan Sontag on the situation. I think there's something that materially matters about the way that you approach making work when you're world building. It's a really different notion. Whether you're doing it just by filming live action or you're looking at Unity software and literally building elements of a world, it's an act of construction. It's an act of fertility. It's an act of making something different. And it's part of what makes me so thrilled about doing this work is I believe it's the storytelling mechanism by which we're going to be able to imagine the future we need to get to. We can't move political will to do things like eliminate cars in cities unless you can really experience it and then sell people on it. It's what we tried to do with Flatties, but I think we've reached a kind of like something's not moving us anymore. Like we're trying harder, more montage, more blowing things up, so more many montage. Buckets of blood, you know, like South Park, I need a montage. It's so true because we're running out of power. Something's up, it's not working. So to me, part of it is the same thing you're discussing about, it's not the same thing about being an auteur. You're not on the set saying, I've had a vision and it's silhouettes and that's, I'm out. You know, you're fundamentally having to collaborate with your audience because you're not telling them to go look here. You have to suggest it. You have to create a moment. Like for me, I just edited a nonfiction piece about a rower and I placed cameras all over the boat. But I have to sort of, as an artist, entirely differently dance with my future audience and think, are they moved by the part of his story where he's talking about his leg now and they're going to look down? Because if they look down, where I put my cut has to be different. So you're actually trying to have a future dialogue with your own viewers. You're engaged in more connection than when you're being like, here is my work and I have framed it. And I mean, I have made work in both ways, and they're both really important to the human cinema art conversation, but we're a little lacking in the collaborative ones. So I think that's my sort of scratch and sniff feminism right there, which is probably a terrible phrase. We'll retire after tonight. But it's a little, I mean, it was definitely a little cliche of me to say that about collaboration, but there is something to it. I do think there are a disproportionate number of women in the Pacific Northwest involved in the VR world compared to any other major market's VR environment, for what that's worth.
A lack of them.
No, so many more.
No, okay, that's what
in the gaming part of VR still is massively male-dominated environment.
Dudes
Dudes
for days.
for
Dudes
days.
for days.
That's a better way to put it.
That's better than what I heard in my head.
Yeah, let's keep that one.
But I also think, just to interject, you know, again, I'm always from the business side of things, and perhaps a bit cliche as well, but you know, so much of the 2D cinematic world is all greenlit by Hollywood, which are run by middle-aged white men, right? There are no rules in this space right now.
Exactly.
Right. There
It
are
is
no
wild. Yeah.
rules in the space. And so, you know, Sandy and I did this wonderful experiment at the Seattle International Film Festival, where we invited a group of very diverse artists, both from their creative roles in the industry and diverse people. And, you know, watching that cross-pollination and the collaboration when we put technology into their hands was incredible, right? And that's how, again, going back to, you know, now that technology is out there and the technologists have taken it as far as they can, it is that kind of environment with different voices and views and things like that I think is going to continue to evolve the medium. But I'm not on the panel, so okay. Let's talk about so let's talk a little bit about how virtual and augmented reality is being used, right? Just from a very kind of factual, you know, yes, we have cinematic VR, right? But some of the most innovative ways in which VR is being used is in a cross-pollination of, you know, private sector endeavors. So what are some of those, Sandy?
Well, if we cut across sectors, so very strongly in a variety of health and medicine. So lots of dentists are experimenting with the use of VR in replacing the gas. Some people say, why not both? But
Wow, I had a whole different take on that. Like, so now they're sticking the cameras in their mouth so they can see what's going on.
Okay. No, it's pretty cool. So there are actually artists that are making pieces that are entirely there to help you meditate and mitigate pain for a variety of applications. There's an incredible piece of research going on in Maryland out of Johns Hopkins, where there's this exoskeleton robotic suit that this young man I just filmed, actually, who is 25 years old and he's training to be a paraplegic rower. And he is wearing this exoskeleton and then wearing a VR headset that makes you're experiencing walking in your headset, and the exoskeleton is in real time responsively walking, and it's regrowing the pathway of the thinking, and it's regrowing nerves that people previously thought no way would they ever grow again. And the early exuberance about it, you know, some people feel like, wait, we don't have the level of data yet to get too crazy, but some of that's amazing.
Just like we used to do that with, you'd stick the mirror on one side and they would watch their one leg move.
Yes.
And that's how they would do it. Now
Yes.
we've got a whole new, wow.
Exactly. And in fact, that same experiment has led this group, this collective in Spain called the Be Another Lab. They've created this whole use of Oculus Rift where you feel like you've swapped bodies with someone else. And you, they're doing this project called the Library of Ourselves, and you sit and listen to a narrative. It's the Library of Ourselves. You listen to a narrative and you look down at an arm, and it's not your arm, but someone is touching it and it feels like it's your arm. It's quite extraordinary. That exact same thing is being used for a variety of medical applications. Then in the entire world of architecture, real estate, plumbing, electricity, all of it, augmented reality will be an absolute mainstay. All buildings, we will know exactly what's in the wall before you ever drill in the wall. you will have, you'll be able to like hold up a phone and it'll say, here's your stud. It's a new stud finder. Right there, augmented reality. So that's just in that practical world, big time. In the world of things like car design, battery design, a combination of being able to walk around an environment, solve a problem in a prototype, 3D print it, and then experiment with it in the field, using those things on a continuum of XR is changing getting to market with something. It changes the amount of fossil fuel you use making it. It changes the amount of people that can work collectively in real time. So like in the future, there are already experiments and the possibility of some expert somewhere in the world operating on you from 30,000 miles away. With an actual, headset. I've had the very good fortune of demoing games where someone is entirely in a different building than you are, but you're playing ping pong with them, and it's real time responsive.
So that's the game. That's the game you picked, ping pong.
Yes, of course. I love ping pong. I'm crazy for ping pong. Yeah. Sports galore. There's so many uses of this in sports. I mean, I obviously could go on, but let's just say that's an open of some of the examples. It's
really interesting, though. I will say over the last several years, I've been to a conference in Bellevue called Immerse, the Immerse Technology Conference, and it's every year in the fall. And it has grown exponentially, which I think is interesting about this space in general, but also unique to Washington State, because Washington does have some very unique assets that make us perfectly positioned to capitalize on this new evolution of entertainment and business. But one of the most interesting panels I went to, just to give you, these are things happening right now, right here, was one of the creative directors for Nordstrom. When they redid the downtown store, they did that all by virtual reality. They had the executives walk through the space, right? There was another gentleman from the city of Tukwila, who's their chief technology officer, who was doing city planning using virtual and augmented reality, right? So these are things that are happening now. And changing the way that people do business now.
Yeah. I met with the Department of Neighborhoods of the city of Seattle today. They're trying to help coordinate these big education campaigns for this program called HALA. It's about livability and affordability of housing in Seattle, all of which are big challenges right now. And they're talking about the possibility of having young people in the neighborhood add into an augmented reality environment so that you're not just looking at, oh, this regulation would mean a single family house, but you're actually looking at some of the elements that would be added, whether it's more kids on your street or another bus serves this neighborhood. Like the potential to build future worlds and play out scenarios is one of the most profound, big, open potentials of all of this. It really is. Like a whole new level of urban planning, government, town hall.
So that's an interesting kind of move towards maybe a darker topic, but the ethics of it all, right? The ethics of, I've watched some content that literally moves me. I mean, like, it teaches, about empathy and allows you to experience places in the world, conflict zones. I mean, I have had these extraordinarily moving experiences, but it also works on the other side as well. And how does the industry police itself, or does it? Or what will there eventually be ratings on content, or what do we think about that? Or should there be?
I think it's still so new, so I'm sure at some point we'll have some regulations on it and ratings, but I like that now you can sort of just do anything with it. I'd hate to see what happens when they start regulating it.
It's a profoundly important question because, I'll just give you an example of something you may not know. So all of these technologies now are actually dependent upon retinal tracking. So from an artistic point of view, a fascinating thing for me is I could do something where I place the sound of a hammer dropping literally right behind this ear. And then I could do something where we're looking at your retinal tracking, if you switch this way, I could trigger a script where a particular thing happens in this part of the frame. Or if your retinal tracking doesn't move there, I could have a different outcome happen. So as a story or game designer, these could be thrilling things. But if you're hooked up to Wi-Fi and your retinal tracking is happening, obviously it doesn't take a lot of steps to get to, whoa, Nelly, in a million ways, where is that data going? I mean, that data of what drew my attention, what did I look at, what were the heat formations on my body. I mean, all these technologies are there and they're all being employed. They're being employed to develop artificial intelligence. They're being employed to develop robots and mechanization, can't speak all of a sudden, mechanization of some functions that are currently human functions, so heat sensors. So we have to, for me, all of that can sound terrifying and frightening, but my entire career to some extent has been about media literacy as let's create a fair fight. I mean, right now, there are plenty of people at the table who only want to use this to track marketing, sales, drive your behavior in one way or another. I want more people who are thrilled at the notion of the freedom of the exploration and let's not control it. I'm always for more speech. I mean, I'm really driven to the notion that the more the marketplace opens up to small actors, large actors, the better. And the more that people who are using this for all of those purposes, from delighting kids at a birthday party, you know, with a lighthearted balloon game, all the way to using it to try to really solve public problems. The more of that's in the public sector, the less I worry about retinal tracking. Because more eyeballs will be on the behavior. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I don't think we have much of a fair fight right now. That worries me the most of all.
Mm-hmm. Just tangentially, there's this wonderful documentary that Sandy Smolin did, who is now a very well-known documentary filmmaker, but is based out of Tacoma, called The Human Face of Big Data. And he did it for National PBS, I believe, and it's a very interesting documentary to watch. It kind of starts to hint at some of these challenges. I want to make sure I'm looking at my clock because I have a thing. Right now, I'm supposed to questions for the panelists.
Oh, that's what we're doing.
Hmm?
That's what we're doing right now.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
According to
at 8:30, we can let these guys ask us questions.
Well, what's questions for the panelists?
It's immersive.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did not. Well, let me just check my time. You may not have any questions yet. Oh wait.
We have questions.
No, I know, but I have more. I have a timeline. I'm following the rules. It does not like me at all. It's pretty impressive. Are you? Oh, here's an interesting one. I'll do that one next. Are you capturing a world or creating a world in the VR space?
I think it depends on how you approach it. So what Mike and I did, we created a world. But if you're filming something that has more to do with capturing reality happening around you, then you're capturing the world versus creating it. I think I aced that one.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that what you're discussing, what's only just started is the mixture of the two. What you were saying, I've seen some artists who are playing with this incredible thing. If you can imagine being physically on the inside of a beach ball, and you could see each of those little stripes. Someone who is a geography person, what do you call those projections?
Ley lines.
Ley lines?
That's totally not it.
Anyway, you know, you're inside the beach ball, right? That essentially is the way your 360 camera is, in essence, filming the world in that way, and the stitching refers to putting that beach ball back together. I saw an artist that played with filming everything essentially against a black background and then placing a variety of characters who are all the same person in a variety of depths in the frame all around you, as though the audience is right in the middle of the theater.
Absolutely.
Right? Theater in the round.
I've also seen them where they take 2D footage and they put it on the ceiling, so there's like this creepy guy looking down at you. So there's all different things you can do. That's where you have the reality, and then you have this world that you can create. And between filming in 2D and putting that in the 3D world, or actually doing virtual reality and building everything in a 3D space, the possibilities are limitless.
And I saw a piece, there's a documentary that you can watch now on, if you have just on a mobile phone, There's a company called Within, and it's on their app. It's called The Ark, and it's all about the dying of the potential extinction of the white rhino in Kenya. And what the filmmaker does, I think, is begin to create new documentary cinematic language by placing you in the middle of the man over here who's guarding the white rhino from poachers in Kenya is staring at you holding his gun. And on this side of the frame is the doctor in San Diego who's trying to freeze the sperm of the last male white rhino to impregnate the female white rhino back in Kenya. And for me, the way in which that's both capturing and creating a world is you're capturing it, and then you want to place your audience where they actually are, their body is responsible in the middle of the two captured stories. So you've both captured and created. I think that's where a lot of it's going.
I'm curious to know, for many in here tonight, they haven't had headsets on, what are the 2 or 3 pieces of content that you would recommend that if they have a cardboard or they have, the ability to see, a more commercial version of a headset, what would you recommend they start with? What is a pretty great first VR experience?
Oh, you want a piece? I think you should be recommending.
You should watch my music video when it's done. Yeah, of course. I've got an app on my phone from Discovery Channel. They've got a VR app, so I get to take safaris, and some of you guys watched some pandas today. So I thought that's pretty cool. Mechanical Dreams did a piece called Potato Dreams, which is where they took a lot of 2D images and stitched it into a 3D world. And I think that's definitely something to just take a look at to see the different ways that you can use the editing process.
NASA's Mars rover has 360.
That's pretty cool.
I think in the world of there's tons, like you're saying, a lot of the mainstream now. New York Times has a really strong app. Within, Weaver, Jaunt. There's quite a bunch of really good work on YouTube, and the only way you would really find that out is, I suppose, just getting a curated list. But I would say in the world of indie work, there's a piece called Notes on Blindness.
I was going to say that one.
I think the world of that piece.
Amazing.
And I think it really helps to define what will be some new explorations here. This is like hinting at, oh, this is what's going to be new. There's a fairly famous piece called The Evolution of Verse, and I think it's amazing because it is speaking to cinema history. It's making a comment upon the original story of the train coming at the audience in the theater and people jumping out of their seats. And this is an homage to that and a statement upon it, so it's great in that tradition.
What was the name of that?
The Evolution of Verse.
VRSE.
And then I also think another, Sandy Smolin, who lives in Washington State, directed a piece called The Click Effect. And the click effect is great because it really shows the other aspect of XR of being a transmedia story. It was a combination, New York Times op doc, an actual written piece in the New York Times, a book, and a 360 documentary about whales and sound. It's really something. So
Sandy actually also wrote for the New York Times an interesting piece about being a 2D filmmaker and going into this space. So if you Google Sandy Smolin, S-M-O-L-E-N, New York Times, that will come up too. I will say, do yourself a favor. Everyone always talks about their first experience being the amusement park ride. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. Like, a lot of people come back and they're just like, you hear a lot about nausea, like, the sickness of it because your head you can't move that fast. But I've seen it give a lot of people a not so good first experience. So stick away from the amusement rides.
I have the vibe out in the lobby, so if you want a first experience before you leave tonight, come and check it out.
I have 9 minutes left. What skills do upcoming practitioners of VR media making need that they should develop?
The ability to hire people that know more than you. Yeah. I think that's for this VR project, not knowing anything, sort of walking into it, making sure that we hired a DP that has a lot of experience working in the 360 format, was the only way we could have accomplished this without making a whole lot of rookie mistakes. Because we had originally designed our sets to be a certain way, and once we get on set, after learning more about the stitching process, we had to adjust things to make sure they weren't on stitch lines and make sure things weren't coming directly towards the camera, because stitching that later on would make things really wonky. So making sure that you have someone on set with you that really understands the technology and what it's like to start with a concept all the way down to a finished product is absolutely key. Otherwise, you're going to make a whole lot of mistakes and it's going to cost you a lot of money in the end. So find someone else to spend their money and hire someone who knows what they're doing to teach you, and then eventually you'll get good enough to do it all on your own.
Great advice for regular filmmaking too. Right?
Well, exactly, and that's the real key is to make absolutely sure that with the added levels of creative technologists that you need on your team, that you don't forget things like test shoots.
Absolutely.
I mean, just knowing some good old-fashioned how to be a filmmaker, and back to the other skill sets, theater direction. Go take an improv class. The exploration of improv in this space has just begun. Talk about something I think is going to cut across. The things I believe will cut across art and commerce very quickly are music and improvisation. Things that are live events, things where the presence is going to matter. That will cut across. When you ask what will make this have a tipping point, live events being able to be seen by thousands of people, live speeches, people and moments that really matter, the way it feels when those cameras are on the lip of the stage. I don't know if you all saw, but there's an amazing group of people out of Los Angeles who went, and Obama's very last speech he gave in Chicago, they did in 360. And they did it it was the most beautiful production. It was live streamed on Facebook 360. It was incredible. And that will give you, I think, a little moment into where we're headed. Those moments, now hundreds of thousands of people can attend moments like that and feel differently about their presence with it.
I mean, that does open, thank you both for that. How do people get involved, right? I mean, that's another really important, how do they stay engaged? How do they get involved? Besides having resources right here, which is amazing to play with, because that's important, you know, how do you get into this environment and stay up to date and making content?
Well, I mean, I know you're going to know more about Bellingham than I do. So,
yeah.
I mean, most of my knowledge is Seattle and...
Right, I think the Foundry has the vibe that you guys can check out. I know for me, I just asked all my film friends to see who's done this before, who has equipment, who has a headset. And the first person I actually talked to was Wilson Large, who had a Google Cardboard. And
From the Cascadia Women's.
Yeah. So I got a chance to check that out, see what that's like. He also has a 360 camera. So it's just finding people that have the gear and that are willing to share their knowledge with you. Facebook is an amazing resource. If you just post on Facebook that you're looking for information on something, you're going to get a lot of people that will respond and send you links or other people to contact. So it's really more about using your network. And if you guys want to get involved, just come contact me and I'll give you other people's contact that can give you more information.
Hear that, Wilson?
Yeah. Thanks.
There are VR meetup groups all over the state, and I highly recommend looking those up. And the chapter out of Seattle is getting so big that it's being broken into several. And so visiting one of those, and then those chapters are now going out and like bolstering chapters around the state, which is something really fun to talk about. And the conferences, I think sooner than later, I hope that that the VR community does an even better job of this, but more and more there are good, on the Facebook page of the VR meetup, are all over the state events, whether it's Immerse or 92 or any, what we're working on. Coming up at the end of April, Nifty, the youth film festival, which is quite good, is going to do an X part of their festival, and that's going to have really incredible 360 films from young people all over the world. And there will be some demos of some really incredible professional work as well. So that's at the end of April. During the Upstream Music Festival, there will be a whole VR demonstration there during Summit. So there's a whole bunch of stuff coming up.
All of which Sandy is programming with her team, and I feel like you should have a tiara or something that says Silicon Rainforest Queen.
I think we had another.
Oh wait, is it time
comment
yet?
here.
Not yet.
Nope,
Not yet.
3 minutes.
I just wanted to say that there actually is a Bellingham virtual reality enthusiast meetup group. If you are on meetup.com, go ahead and just search that, Bellingham virtual reality. It does meet at the Foundry.
There you go.
The fellow that's in charge of that actually has done a tremendous job reaching out to some of the preeminent game designers and things. And so like last month we were Skyping with someone in Beijing. It's really pretty impressive who he's been in contact with. Each time there's a speaker. And so I really encourage you to go ahead and hop on meetup.com and look at that VR meetup. The other thing is that the first Friday of every month, the Foundry will go ahead and host a demo night. So you're welcome to come down and go ahead and try it out as well. One thing that's interesting is that there's an organization called VR First that's located in Frankfurt, Germany. It's a relatively new organization, and their whole point is to go ahead and provide, like what the Foundry is doing, provide the equipment so that people can come in and they can go ahead and use it, and they can develop their app, using Unity or using their film or whatnot, without that upfront cost out themselves. In addition to that, they're actually adding in some curriculum to go ahead and train people how to go ahead and move forward with some of this. And so, like I said, it's relatively new. They're partnering with a couple of universities. Of course, we've filled out the application to be part of it. Haven't been accepted yet, but we'll see how it goes. But it's pretty impressive, some of the stuff that people are doing to go ahead and, because that oftentimes is the barriers, going ahead and having the equipment. And so there's a bunch of people around the globe that are trying to go ahead and make that available to you.
Thank you.
And I should say another more and more affordable resource is that there are multiple camera rental companies that are now renting out 360 cameras. I shot something on a 360 camera that I rented for only $24 for 4 days from lensrentals.com. You might have a local camera company that's doing 360 gear, but increasingly it's becoming affordable.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Okay. I also wrote this one down, but I think the woman that actually wrote down a question. I guess specifically for Avielle, but I guess if you have opinions as well.
Sandy and I never have opinions.
Experiences, I should say. So I've worked with you on several shoots, and you're Avielle, you do everything. But a lot of the stuff I've worked with you on, you've done production design.
Mm-hmm.
Going into this project with Micah, how did the production design process differ from a normal film? And how did the limitations in the different medium change how you approach that?
So first off, because I directed this one, I got a chance to also do the production design, but I didn't actually have to build the sets. So it was an amazing experience being able to delegate that task and working with people from Conflux Studio, and they executed everything perfectly. As far as coming up with the overall design, again, it goes back to my theater background. I grew up in theater, so I've designed sets for that. So understanding that, again, you have a much larger space in which the viewer is going to see, so you can't hide things quite as well as you can with 2D. So making sure that every element is exactly the way you want it is key. But then also with the technology, like I was talking about the different stitch lines. So we have our basic design that we came up with, but then needing to understand where each piece has to be in that set to make sure we don't disturb the stitch lines or make it more difficult for us to stitch things together. So again, working with Laura James, our DP, she was able to work with us to make sure that we didn't make those mistakes that most people make. Does that sort of answer your question?
I would just add one more thing, which is where you have to mess with placing light is a whole other nut to crack. To get really good with figuring out motivation for where there might be light. Like, I came up with a gag where they make these things that look exactly like a regular book, but you open it up and it's an LED light. So I had a character in a piece I just shot, just motivated to open this book so that, oh, she's lit. But I've just listened to so many people are coming up with so many interesting solutions to it, because, you know, unless you're in the middle of a scenario where everyone is properly lit for you, it's really difficult to figure out where to put light.
Right. That's
You
one
know?
of the biggest things for us was finding the right location, because that was key, and it took us probably a month and a half or 2 months to find a location, because we wanted to make sure that we had a space that had grid lighting above. This way we're not bringing in every single piece and having C-stands scattered everywhere.
Right.
So making sure we had that, and then we also worked with some guys, Trevor from the Wild Buffalo, who does projection mapping. This way we can add more light but have it be very interesting, and we're able to control that light a lot better to help guide the viewer and also to add more of an emotional feel to the scene. So lighting is key.
Really good though, note there in that think out of your film circle, right? All kinds of creative professionals are going to have creative ideas about how to solve these problems. So talk to musicians, talk to, you know, talk to game designers, talk to all kinds of people. So,
The intersection is the strength itself, which is our strength in this region. So.
Right. I think there's a couple photos outside where I'm literally sitting in a chair in the middle of our set, and I think I pulled a couple different people to just come and talk to me so I can work through a problem. I know I pulled Aubrey in to talk to her about like different ways that we can add our element of red, because we had, it's good. We wanted to make sure that we had something that we could do but not ruin costumes, and also to be cautious of the space. So after going back and forth with a couple people and then talking to Aubrey, we realized that we have to make this a lighting cue. The easiest way to do it is to add that lighting cue. So making sure that you are collaborative with every aspect, of what you're doing is going to allow your production to be a lot better than you thought, because everybody has amazing ideas, and as long as they're able to share them effectively, you can come up with some pretty cool stuff.
I was going to say put it under here, but I've accidentally called my husband 3 times. Yes.
What frightens you about the technology in terms of, you touched on briefly about the ethical considerations. So what's the dark side to the technology that maybe is a little troublesome about possible applications or where it could be headed?
I mean, the red pill, the Matrix.
I mean, it alters your reality. It alters the way that you think, literally.
You know, I was being a little bit facetious, but if you really begin to experience immersive work, and for folks who don't know what you were referring to, projection mapping has become so good, so insanely good. They have a new projector that's being released at the NAB.
What does that mean, projection mapping?
Projection mapping refers to, okay, I'll try to do it in a smaller version. I know, let me give it a shot. Okay. Computational photography refers to the use of the mathematics that would be involved in my knowing how far away the end of your nose is compared to that camera. If I had the ability from where I'm sitting to shoot out a laser that could read every single surface in this room all around me in every direction and capture the information computationally to recreate the 3-dimensional forms and then project onto it so as to make it look like it bent around that shape perfectly. That would be a combination of computational photography, which is required for virtual reality world building, so that I could like film this microphone and actually have it as a 3D object that can move around the frame. And in a projection mapping context, I've got a computer that is sending a signal through the projector to hit just this ball with the image perfectly, and then hit this perfectly. It's really extraordinary when you see it.
So may I?
Yes, go ahead.
So there actually is a fellow in town that does a bunch of projection mapping, and I don't know if you've been involved or been to the night market or anything. He's the one that projected all the images on the Faith Life building and everything. One of the things that's great about what he does is he takes that architecture again into account, just like just like she's saying here, where things may fall, but they'll bounce off the windows and then roll down and things like this. A good functional one is the sandbox, the interactive sandbox, where actually it is literally a sandbox, and if you pile up, it's topographical map, think about that. The projector is facing down, and if you pile up the sand, it'll go ahead and turn into the red, yellow. If you dig that out, all of a sudden now it's water. And it's very, very interactive, and it's damn impressive.
Yeah, and so in real time, with projection mapping, gesturally, you can be building a world. You could build a solution for, you know, oh, here's the Seattle tunnel. Here's why it's always going to be a bad idea. This is why but you could actually do that in real time with projection mapping. So to come back to your question, if I'm being really candid with you, we have to take seriously that all of this is part of an intersection right now between what really will mean the human experience and the human experience in relationship to machines. So I am not just an unbridled enthusiast for it. I'm an unbridled enthusiast for the literacy of it, the consideration of it in our world, where we do and don't want it, what role we want to play as authors of it, consumers of it. It can and will play enormous roles in how we view one another. It is a very sentient art form. Your feelings of being present are very powerful, and once it's that powerful, you would have to take it seriously as potentially working for good or evil, plain and simply.
Even politically, I mean, if you think about, you know, like you said, The Matrix, but you know the movie, sort of Wag the Dog, remember that?
Sure.
So it created a fictional situation. I mean, you can manipulate, I would think, in the political arena, whatever you wanted to manipulate, so that there are hundreds of millions of people attending the inauguration, for example.
I mean, and taking it one step further, how many have young children in the room? Right, I have a 9-year-old, and the way that he interacts with media, there's actually a brilliant program that came right out of this cinema that I talked to the governor about bringing media literacy into middle schools, and then inviting them to come here for your the documentary festival in October. Kids who are young have a completely different relationship with media. They are going to grow up in an environment where this is completely normal to them, and you have okay, that's editorial. There are many parents who are not aware of what those experiences are for their children, nor are they teaching media literacy. And so think about that, right? We're having this conversation, but if it is second nature to a younger generation, and that is how they grow up and what they know to be normal, that is, for me, the red pill, right? So
I would also say that there has never been a more important moment for librarians, and the reason for that is directly related to whether or not we can move forward commercially in many realms. And it refers to, like, everything I said about plumbers, electricians, etc. None of that would count if you worry that the information is just not reliable. If you're in a world where all facts are constantly manipulated for a variety of ne'er-do-well reasons, how would you know if a fact is a fact? Because, as we're saying, the actual media ability to make anything believable is quite staggering. So given how staggering that is, back to what I take seriously is understanding that, knowing what that looks like, and knowing about the international efforts right now to even create programs. This is a true story. In Eastern Europe, there are a group of librarians who got funded to do this really high-end research to try to create data that self-corrects in the chain of coming to you, so that in essence it's watermarked with its own accuracy in real time. And there's a program that I saw demoed where you wear just regular looking glasses and you have a foreign language translated for you in real time across your glasses. This group of librarians is working to use a similar technology to, in essence, give you the authorization of your data that you're using in real time. Having protections, I would think, if I were worried about a market of any kind, verifiability of data that's going to become this ubiquitous seems to me like it'd be something I'd be putting some research into. some dollars, some resources, very carefully, very quickly. And getting my people, all of my people, up to snuff about using this fluid, in a fluid way with other means of communication seems pretty important. Because to be clear, you're talking about a ubiquitous conversation. Glass, regular glass, will all be LED enabled within 5 years. I mean, stuff that's as thin as paper that you can roll around a pencil is OLED, is something that you could have playing information. I mean, that's Minority Report stuff too, right? Like, you're talking about a world of constant screens. I'm not necessarily espousing those things, but all the technology is here for them to happen. So if we're going to design a world making those things as choices and not just have them bombastically thrust at us, I think we have to be in it.
Mm-hmm. They're prototyping, like, just anecdotally on a very, like, everyday, completely not scary level. When I was at this Immerse conference, the guy from Nordstrom was like, we're demoing goggles right now where you go in to a store, they're trying to reinvent themselves in the age of new department stores, and you can hold something up and you can look at it, and on your like AR in your world, it'll tell you what sizes they have, what colors they have, and if you have a photo, it will put it on you, right? Like, that technology is right here today, right now in front of us. And
Yes.
a really good place for us to kind of stop there for a minute and think about the opportunities and the challenges. And nobody owns this space right now, but people want to own it. And if the state of Washington wants to continue to to be a part of the evolution of this medium, we have to work for it, and we have to work hard for it. And this is not a Seattle thing. This is not a Spokane thing. This is very much could be a Bellingham thing, could be a Walla Walla thing. So, I hope that this conversation opened up some, really interesting thoughts, and you're thinking about opportunities. And, I truly, truly enjoy this community. I get so much out of it when I come, and I like seeing what you guys are doing, and I think there's something very special happening here. So, thanks for letting me be a part of it, but I have more script. I want to thank the Bellingham Film for putting on these mixers, and Cascadia International Women's Festival, Film Festival, for helping put together the VR discussion. If you're looking to get more involved in the film scene, reach out to Avielle or Lorraine. For volunteer opportunities at Bellingham Film and Cascadia International Women's Film Festival. By the way, that is so true. I know how hard they're working, and they could use some additional help. So if you have an hour or two, please, please.
Can we give you guys applause real quick?
Yeah.